Good morning, afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Today is Sunday, March 13th. I know in the US they turned the clocks forward yesterday, so there may be a little bit of confusion today with times and things, but we are here. Let's start by setting our intentions using the Four Immeasurable Prayers. Set our intention and make aspiration, and just try to keep in mind the bigger view that we talk about. Um, it's called the Four Immeasurables. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. And like we spoke of before, we say that because it's in accordance with the view of Buddhism, right? When we talk about what Buddhism is about, the view of Buddhism, which encompasses especially these three tenets. One is interdependence, and that the nature of reality, the true nature of reality, is that everything that exists is interdependent and does not exist on its own. The second thing is impermanence, because everything in the universe is impermanent, nothing is eternal. And the third is shunyata, which can be translated in a few different ways, but basically it means voidness of inherent existence. But it also means, in some ways, it also relates to the unborn sphere of phenomena, which means limitless potentiality at the same time. What does that mean in terms of us? It means that we are not static or fixed. We perceive ourselves as such, but that's really an illusion, right? And that connects to interdependence, because even on a level of like quantum physics, when you think about it, the universe is basically this big giant amalgamation of molecules and waves and particles and things they don't even really know when you break things down into the smaller and smaller components, molecular components and subatomic and waves and things. And that this separateness that we consider ourselves as, this island that we consider our existence, that our existence really hinges upon, is an illusion, in fact. And this very limited subjective experience that we experience life from. So in Buddhism, we're looking at that big picture. And that big picture is so vast, that view of interdependence, impermanence, and voidness of inherent existence, it's so vast, it's hard to really get a handle on and bring into our day-to-day existence. So we start with making aspirations that, all beings, because we are not apart from all beings, have happiness and the causes of happiness. Because when all beings are liberated from, the delusion of separateness and things like that, then, we will all return to our true nature. We will all be existing from the true nature of enlightenment, of Buddha mind, which we all have inherently in us. It's just our karmic obscurations that reify this illusion of separateness, that keep us in this cycle of samsara and negative emotions like anger, attachment, aversion, and things like that. So when we make aspirations and we use this big picture and say, may all beings have happiness, there is something really, it's not just this storybook thing. There is something almost scientific about it. And I think it can help us to really think about that. I like making comparisons to quantum physics because there's nothing really, we're not really talking about anything religious in a traditional sense. Buddhism is not a theistic religion. Buddha was not a god, is not worshipped as a god, but, was a being in human form, 2,500 years ago, who attained enlightenment, meaning transcended those obscurations and that delusion of separateness, and realized it and lived from the mind of that place, lived his life and taught through the mind of being in that place. And that's why we have the Dharma. But we're not, no one's asking you to believe anything supernatural per se, or have blind faith in anything that's really out of the nature of science, in a sense, which is what appealed to me about these teachings. And what we're doing is we are working on a spiritual path, although I don't see it necessarily as a religious path. But what does that mean, a spiritual path? Well, we're trying to live our lives and work with our mind to come from a place that's more in tune with this vast view, what's more in harmony with this view of interdependence and impermanence and voidness of inherent existence and all those things. Oddly enough, the word religion, when you trace its Latin roots means reconnect. Ligare is connection, right? And tethering, almost reconnecting. Well, what are we reconnecting to? We're reconnecting to our true nature, which has always been there, and has always existed, that true nature of oneness. Where there's a desire, I think, because we know it, because something in our psyche knows that the truth of this oneness, that there's a desire to go back to it, to reconnect, if you will. So I think that's a very human impulse. With that said, we'll do some meditation. I know there are some new people today, so we may do a bit of review while we meditate. So I may do some guided meditation while we work on meditation. But first, we'll do the 9 purifying breaths. So if you will imagine and try to visualize adjacent to your spinal column, these 3 channels where the subtle energies move through your body. The center channel is blue. In men, traditionally, the right channel is white, and in women, the left channel. And in men, the white channel is right, and the red is the left. And women, it's reversed. But depending on how you identify, you just make that decision. And first, we're going to take our right index finger. We're going to tuck our thumb underneath, and we're going to take it to our left nostril, and we're going to breathe into the right nostril, into the right channel, either the white or the red, depending on how you define it. We're going to breathe in. We're going to imagine it going down to the navel area where the 3 channels meet. Then we're going to breathe it out. When we switch, we'll switch nostrils and breathe out of that same channel, clearing that channel away. So 3 breaths. This is 1. And again. Switching hands and going to the right. We're going to breathe into the left channel, the red or the white. White channel usually corresponds to the negative emotion of anger and its opposite, which is patience. The red is attachment and its opposite as well, which is contentment or even loving kindness and thing. And the center channel is wisdom, and the opposite of that is being obscured from the truth, right? Second breath, left side. Left channel. Breathe out. And the third. And you can put your hands down. Use both nostrils going to the center, blue channel. Hold at the navel where the three channels join. Breathe out. And breathing out obscurations to the truth, really, to the wisdom that knows the view. And the last one, we breathe in, but we're going to do the out breath and imagine our breath and consciousness coming out of the crown chakra and merging with space, consciousness merging with the outer world. And let's take that into meditation. For those of you who already know the technique, you go right into it. Those of you who are new, you should be sitting comfortably, cross-legged. You can be, like this or like this. If you'd rather be in a chair, you can be in a chair, but if you are in a chair, have your feet flat on the floor and your hips either level or above your knees. Hands can either be on your knees or it could be like this, palm into the back of your hand, thumbs touching, or like this, whatever's comfortable. Back should be straight. That's the important part, to keep those energy channels moving and open and moving freely. Not too erect. Shoulders not back and tight, but just relaxed. Head slightly tilted forward. Lips closed, but the teeth a little bit apart. And tongue resting where the roof of your mouth meets the top of your teeth. Breathing through the nose, unless you can't. Tibetan Buddhist tradition, you meditate with our eyes open, but wherever you're going to rest your gaze, do it lightly, not too intensely, and not spaced out, not out of focus, cross-eyed or anything like that. Just like resting it lightly, wherever you're looking. And start to breathe. Not deep, not shallow, even relaxed breaths. Relax the body, settle into this posture and position, and breathe. You can, if you like, focus your attention on the place where your upper lip meets your nostrils, where the air is going in and out. And just focus your attention there. And most likely what's going to happen is you're going to start to think, which is perfectly normal and fine. The point is, the whole crux of this practice that we're doing here is to become aware of the fact that we are thinking and aware of what we're thinking. That's the first trick, right? So I'm focusing my attention on this place here between the upper lip and the nose, and breathing. And then I catch a thought. Doesn't matter what it is. The key is to become aware. And once you become aware, in that moment you become aware, put your attention back on that place, back to the breath. Focus your attention back on that space between the nose and the upper lip. Most likely you will have another thought. Same thing applies. Become aware that you're thinking. You can even become aware of what you're thinking about, but don't judge it. Don't judge the fact that your thinking is bad. Don't judge the quality of the thought, negative thought, evil thought, good thought, virtuous thought. Don't think about that. Don't push it away and don't follow it. Follow the story of it. That the train of thought, the chain of thought, which is what we've done our whole life and lives before that. Just go back to the breath, focus back on that space. Leave the thought where it is. That's what we're doing. So we're paying attention to what our mind is doing. In this class, we use the visualization technique where we imagine our mind being like the sky, but a completely clear, luminous, unstained, limitless blue sky. And the thoughts that arise are like clouds that arise from that limitless clarity and dissolve back into it without doing any damage or any kind of marking, blemishing to that limitless, pure clarity of blue sky. So you imagine the thought that you catch yourself thinking, imagine it just dissipating back into the clarity of mind, which is the true nature of mind, has that clarity. Back to the breath. That can be almost like your mantra during this practice. The breath is the anchor of the practice. But the crux of the practice really is mind looking at mind. We're using our mind to watch our mind. I'm breathing. I'm focusing on this space between my nose, upper lip, and I notice I'm thinking about the time change and how that's affected the class, and who's coming and who's not. I leave that where it is. I see that thought as a cloud in that limitless clarity of sky-like nature of mind, and it dissolves in. And then I settle back into that sky-like nature of mind, that vastness and spaciousness. Back to the breath. When we talk about mind looking at mind, we're talking about a very vast, spacious mind. Really looking at what's arising within it. Temporary qualities, temporary elements, thought arising within this vast, vast spaciousness that is the nature of our mind. Those of you who have been doing this for a while, pay attention and know that that spaciousness is always there when you practice. When you really look at the thought and leave it where it is and let it dissipate and go back to the breath, you're going back to that vast nature of mind, which is the base. That's your baseline. It's always there. That's really the truth, right? And have confidence in that. And no matter what's going on in the mind, what thoughts, sometimes thoughts come very rapidly and sometimes they're very powerful and sticky. They plague us. They're difficult to manage. They're infused with energy. It could be, energy of suffering and negative emotion, anger, fury, fears. But if we do allow it to just dissipate, get some distance, we go back to that spaciousness and that calm, which is there always, and always accessible. We are not creating that place. It's there. Okay. Wonderful. So Victoria is going to continue the discussion on 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, which is a text by Golchu Togme Zangpo, who was a monk who wrote down these 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, which is the heart teaching of Garchen Rinpoche, who Victoria and I, who is the teacher, Tibetan Buddhist Lama that Victoria and I, he's our main root Lama, as we call it in the tradition. So she will take it from here. And after that, there's a Q&A function here. If you have any questions about the meditation, about anything I said, or anything Victoria said,
practices, a daily practice of Garchen Rinpoche, and many, many lamas who consider this to be a complete a practice path. That means that it includes path, view, and result. It basically kind of has, the explanation of how our mind should be set, of how our conduct should be set, and what our view should be based on. Michael has touched upon many of the things. Anyway, continuing with the 37 Bodhisattva practices, number 31, stanza number 31. If having merely the appearance of a practitioner, one does not investigate one's own mistakes, it is possible to act contrary to the Dharma. Therefore, constantly examining one's own errors and abandoning them is the Bodhisattva's practice. In other words, the level of truth and understanding of where one is. It's not about holding blame and saying, oh, I'm incapable of feeling this vastness of when I say the Four Immeasurables that all mother sentient beings are my mothers. Perhaps I cannot feel it right now, but perhaps there's just one person that I can see across the room, and I can say that person, I can understand that they could be my mother in this life and in many other previous lives. And from that, you can expand that vision. It's very, very important to know where we are, start with where we are, and work on expanding, eliminating our flaws and expanding our mental capacity to embrace others, to understand non-duality, and ultimately try to come closer and closer toward the view with a realization as opposed to just merely informational basis. Like when we speak about non-duality, when we speak about impermanence and things like that. Stanza number 32. The entirety of the Buddhist path is examining through introspection and correcting behavior, contextualizing it to our life and trying to merge our life with the view, not simply reiterating the view, reading lots of books, and saying I am a Buddhist practitioner and so I am, even expanding one's ego. No, it's the opposite. It's trying to cut down the ego, expand our bodhicitta, mind of enlightenment, really touch the base of our true nature, subdue the 5 poisonous afflictions, the ego, and try to have a vast attitude and make sure that it is always nurtured and growing. And stanza number 32, if influenced by disturbing emotions, one points out another bodhisattva's faults, oneself is diminished. Therefore, not speaking about the faults of those who have entered the great vehicle is a Bodhisattva's practice. And actually, it is not just about those that we call bodhisattvas, the great beings who have, a certain attainment, who have compassion based on a certain degree of wisdom that understands reality. It's really not seeing faults of others. It is always about seeing one's own faults. But these two, that's the Buddhist path. We are always working on ourselves. On the Buddhist path, we are never working on others. We are not there to criticize them, to deride them, and to think about their faults. The Buddhist path is about eliminating one's own faults. And if we want to implement any kinds of changes to our reality, we have to do that by changing ourselves intrinsically. And make sure that that is the source of our action and our behaviors. Anyway, these two stanzas, really, both of these stanzas urge us to examine our own mind, our intrinsic reality. The stanzas urge us to examine the intentions before we act on them. They remind us that a mere appearance of being a practitioner can be extremely, extremely harmful to ourselves, because we could be very deluded. We may think that, when we deride and we make many negative statements about someone else and notice their faults, that we're being a tremendous practitioner. But the truth of that is that we're being a non-practitioner, and we're actually kind of creating more negative habits and hurting others through these kinds of practices. So these two stanzas really point to be careful. It is always said in Buddhism that our view should be as vast as space, limitless as sky. But our behavior should be, our actions should be as fine as barley flour. It should be so well examined before we act on. Because information is just information. It's really what we do with it. Information can create an atomic bomb and eliminate all existence on the planet many times over again. And information can also cure cancer. So it's really not about information. It's about the impulse which acts on that information. That's really our inner being, and the way that we use that information. Because information in itself is not, it's not nothing very special until we do something with it. And information, we've discussed before 8 consciousnesses, the way in Buddhism we discuss how the relative mind perceives reality. 7 consciousnesses. So of the 8 consciousnesses, the 8 consciousnesses, to quickly reiterate, 5 are sensory perceptions. They're called 5 perceptory consciousness. The 6 is a consciousness that labels and organizes information, and that's called mental consciousness. That's kind of like the base with which we play. That's what information is. But consciousness number 7 is the ego. It's the I, and that ego is enveloped in the what we call in Buddhism 5 afflictions, the 5 poisons. I want more, so it's my attachment. I hate you, that's my hatred. I'm envious of you, that's my envy. Then there is my arrogance and my stinginess. That's the 7th consciousness. The 8th consciousness is basically the storage of habitual patterns, which, given the right circumstances, they blossom again. Anyway, what I wanted to say, the point is that information is just the 5 sensory consciousness and the 6 consciousness, which organizes it. What's important to pay attention to, what these 2 stanzas really tell us to do, is to pay attention to consciousness number 7, the dualistic ego consciousness, because that is filled with these, what we call the 5 afflictions. If we act out of that place, when we're deriding or criticizing someone, we are not helping them. We are not being practitioners. We're being just ordinary people who are acting on negative impulses. And we cannot kid ourselves about that. If we want to be practitioners, before we act on these negative impulses, we examine them very, very thoroughly. We examine them very carefully. And we make sure that the source of our actions, the source of our thoughts, is never based on these kinds of emotions, is never based on that mind. And as Michael was guiding us through the meditation, he pointed out the 2 levels of mind. So the 8 consciousnesses is our relative mind. And underneath it, what strings all these moments together is what we call the nature of mind. It's that with which we go to sleep, the awareness with which we go to sleep and with which we wake up. It's the awareness that we have from the moment of our birth till the moment and through our death. The nature of mind is the basis that is, limitless. That's why we're able to create, horrendous things, and that's why we're able to create beautiful things. That basis has a very limitless nature, but the basis itself is not corrupted by the ego mind. So if we act from the basis, and this is what meditation is for. Meditation is designed, and its purpose is specifically for finding and habituating the base nature, because our base nature is pure. It doesn't have all that the relative 8 consciousnesses have. So when we act, we always have to know, are we acting from this egoistical source and the poisons, or are we settling that mind and finding the spaciousness, finding the base, loving and compassion? That is really our nature, because, Bodhichitta, the awakened mind, is our base nature. And Buddha was a man like you and I. He started as a man like you and I, but he was able to pacify the mind of 8 consciousnesses and, completely habituate the mind of wisdom, compassion. And that's why he became a Buddha. Buddha only means one who is awakened. That is our potentiality. It's really our birthright. Everything in this universe that has a consciousness is meant to become a Buddha. The sleeper must awaken. Last week I asked everybody to do Tonglen practice for Ukraine, and Tonglen practice is a practice that we do on the breath. Tonglen means to give and take. So we take the dark and painful nature of suffering, we inhale it at the heart center, we dissolve that with the light, and when we exhale back and send to these beings who are suffering, we send them the pure, pristine light of love and compassion. And we continue to do this practice, but I ask you please to examine, when you're doing this practice, examine from which bases it comes from. And in Buddhism, we have three levels. We have the outer, inner, and secret level on which everything takes place. So on the outer level, please check that you're not doing Tonglen, or you're not sending or doing something what you consider good with the level of anger or frustration or some other kind of a seed, something that is based in the negative, destructive emotion of the ego. Make sure, and also keep in mind, karma, cause and effect. Whatever we put out there that is what we're going to receive. I mean, if we're going to plant an orange seed into the soil, we will get oranges. So if we want to send good intentions, and we want these intentions to result in activation of something good, we have to make sure that these intentions are not coming from a poisonous place. We have to check the inner level. We have to check the source of the action and intention. Am I engaged in a delusional play of being a good guy versus the bad guy, or is my action truly based in something that has subdued the five poisons and is activated from the basis of my nature, the nature of mind? We have to make sure that that's what we do. And the secret level, check the source of your intention in connection to Bodhichitta, the mind of enlightenment. We've been talking about it for a long time now in conjunction with the 37 Bodhisattva practices. Does your secret, or in other words, the ultimate level, is it connected to love and compassion? Because, love and compassion is right here. This is your nature. And this part is your ego, your relative. Make sure that your secret level is really your ultimate level, that you connect to it, that you decisively know that your intention is not limited, is not specific to something because you have some kind of a stake in it. Make sure that it is limitless love. Make sure that it is limitless light, and that you're sending it without it being corrupted by anything, from this consciousness number 7, the ego and the poisons. Make sure that it is not partial. Make sure that it understands non-duality of self and other. Garchen Rinpoche says that wisdom, our primordial mind, is very, very simple. And she says that because when you see somebody burning in a car, it is a very natural expression of our being that we want to run over and help. We feel empathically the suffering. That's our true nature. And then, of course, the ego jumps in and says, no, I have to go to lunch. This is a bad time for me to stop and to help these people, get out of the burning car. So make sure that you connect to that simplicity and have, bravery to connect to that simplicity, habituate that simplicity. That's what meditation really is. That's the, the basis of everything. And when sending prayers and engaging in powerful methods like Tonglen, please make absolutely certain that the origin of these practices and intentions is pure and unpolluted. So I think, it would be wise to start with the 9-breath purification. 9-breath purification, you empty the wide channel of anger, and, other afflictions that are connected to anger and hatred. You empty out the red channel of attachment and, of things that bind you to something and make your view very limited. And you empty your central channel of ignorance, and you make your mind very vast. On the last breath, you can, consciousness merges with space. From that moment, when you feel that your consciousness is pacified, merges with space, you do the Tonglen practice. It is the breath practice of taking and receiving. And at the end, I would also say, close with the 9-breath purification and purify again, and this way you really get in touch with your subtle body with your subtle energy. This is how you learn how to distinguish really the energy of love, the energy of vast understanding, to an energy that's like a very focused, conceptual understanding, a really small thing in which we have some kind of a stake. We have to know how to differentiate the sources from which our intentions come. And that's what meditation really is. And thank you for all the prayers for Ukraine and for doing all the Tonglen practice.
The word bodhicitta, right, and something that comes up a lot in Dharma discussions and Dharma teachings and stuff. It translates exactly as is it awakened heart, awakened mind and heart.
So bodhi means awakened, and chitta means both heart and mind.
Right.
And of course, in Buddhism, mind is placed. Our life wind. In Buddhism, in Buddhist medical tantras. There are many winds, but there are 5 main winds, and the life force wind is a place that our heart is situated at our heart center, and that's really where you connect to for your really profound level of your awareness. It's not the busy mind of conceptuality, of duality, subject and object, of your ego. So very often mind and heart are connoted because the place, the locus, is actually at your heart center. And it's a very good idea to bring down your energy, gather your energy from everywhere in your body and start to settle it at your heart center. So bodhicitta means body, awakened, and chitta means heart or mind.
So the awakened heart, awakened heart, awakened mind, which is what we're cultivating in our mind and aspiring towards and working with our mind towards, is often related to compassion. And we talk very much in Dharma talks and Dharma discussions about compassion, cultivating compassion, right? But most of the time when we think about compassion, we think about it in terms of an object, right? We walk down the street and we see someone who's homeless and who's, suffering. Maybe they're ill, they're begging, it's freezing out, they don't have a coat. And you feel what you consider compassion towards that person, which often in our unenlightened mind is the same thing as pity, which is not really bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is without an object. So it's almost like a complete mindset that encompasses compassion on a very universal level, not towards this person, this person I have compassion for, but this person's rich and he's an asshole and I'm not going to have compassion for him for what he does. But yet, if he's still suffering, if he's still in samsara and not enlightened, he will be subject to suffering, of old age, sickness, and death, and many other sufferings that we associate with samsara. So when you hear that word bodhicitta, it's more than compassion. It's a much different mindset that the Buddhas, the enlightened ones, relate to the world in, through and in, and it's but it is something when we make the Four Immeasurable prayers. That's definitely that prayer. I'm sure came, or whoever wrote that prayer came up with that prayer. It came out of that awakened mind or awakened heart. So I just wanted to make that distinction.
Yes. Actually, bodhicitta has 2 levels, and they always go together. They're never separated. There is what is called the ultimate bodhicitta and the relative bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta is how we take that ultimate bodhicitta, which understands non-duality, which does not differentiate between this guy suffering and that guy suffering. It simply understands suffering. and understands that we, our thought, everything is interconnected, interdependent, and actually when we talk about emptiness, it is one, so non-dual. So relative bodhicitta takes that view, that understanding, that non-discrimination, and very vast intention to benefit others. And also understands that it is our nature to love and benefit others, and applies it through what is called the relative bodhicitta. That's how we interact in the world. These two levels should never, ever be separated. They should always go together. Otherwise, they're just mundane, ordinary behaviors. It's like, here's $1, go buy yourself a sandwich. We should come from a very different place. And bodhicitta, should have a very selfless aspect to it, with an understanding that eventually we can cultivate a mind of where, really bodhicitta means, in classical Buddhist terms, is that we are willing to take their suffering and give to the other person. We're willing to take their suffering and give them our happiness in exchange of oneself for another. That's really what bodhicitta is. And we have to cultivate compassion based on that. We're not talking about pity. We're not talking about ordinary mind. Here's $1 and I feel so much better because my ego is flattered that I've given you that $1. But that's nothing. That's kind of, it's better than not, but it's not a really meaningful act in terms of cultivating a mind of enlightenment, the Buddhist path. Mind of enlightenment is a much broader and vastly different view and conduct.
And talking about compassion, as a teacher, we had teachings with a while back who passed away, who was very good and wrote a very good book called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. His name was Sogyal Rinpoche, and he used to say that compassion was more in tune with respect rather than pity, respect, which always cut through to me and made it woke something up in me. With that in mind, we'll go to questions if we have some. What does Buddhism teaching say about exploiting people for their own gain? Well, I don't think you even need Buddhism to understand that that's a negative behavior. Exploitation of people for whatever reason. I'm not sure, the context that you're talking about. So I'm talking a little bit generally here. In terms of morality, Buddhism is not so much about this is what the Buddha said to do, this is what the Buddha said not to do, follow his rules, it's not so much about that. It's really about working with the mind and really cultivating wisdom. It doesn't take much, it doesn't take a great deal of wisdom or intelligence to know what's basically good and what basically is not. We know. We know it's wrong to steal. We know it's wrong to take something that doesn't belong to us. We know lying is not, a good thing. Basic sanity. It doesn't get into all this, these fine points of morality. What we're really talking about is negative and positive karma. Cause and effect. Karma is one of the very basic and important tenets of Buddhism. It's a very vast topic, which I don't want to go into because we've had a great discussion on karma by what's Vesna Wallace that did that class. That's in our archives here. So, if it's about exploiting, I can't imagine why that would be anything worth doing.
In Buddhism, harming anyone in any way, and that doesn't include just people, it includes any sentient being, any living being. Harming others on many, many levels brings harm to oneself of immeasurable proportions, in that you also cannot also exercise really your Buddha nature. You remain in that kind of a dull mental state. Those kinds of behaviors are still behaviors of someone who has not, in any way awakened even a little bit of one's potentiality to, to be more than, than that.
How can meditation help me improve my spirituality, not only with myself, but with my stressful warehouse workplace environment? Well, you bring whatever work you do on your mind, you're going to bring into any environment that you're in. You know what I mean? Your interaction with the world, and often very much the feedback that you get from that interaction in the world will be very dependent on your state of mind and what you're bringing to the table, obviously. So, you can't change other people. You can't, you can change your workplace if you want to get a new job. That's up to you. But you can change what you're bringing and how you cope with the stress and how you set certain boundaries and how you deal with certain people and how you deal with, your mind responding to situations. That's how it can help. I mean, and that translates obviously to all areas of life.
And you can also make the most mundane kinds of things. You obviously have habituated yourself to thinking that these interactions, that these things that you have to do to earn a living or whatnot, your situation, are bad. When you're sitting on the cushion, it's good. Try not to separate sitting on the cushion and interacting in the world as separate behaviors. Try to think of being patient, having generosity, in difficult situations with others when they ask you for too much as practice. Try to merge practice into every moment of your life, and you may enjoy, even the most dull moments if you're open to them. A lot of what stresses us is because we already a priori said to ourselves, that situation is going to be terrible. I hate it. I don't want to go into it. But if you actually go in and try to have an open mind and deal with people with generosity and patience, they may surprise you. You may surprise yourself.
I've been doing Tonglen every day. Since reading the news is creating an energy within me, I may as well try to use Tonglen to turn it into a positive. But how do we know it's working?
It's your Buddha nature, as Michael was saying at the top of the class, don't think of us as these solid bodies, as these separated things. Think of us as a continuum of the universe, the living texture that is cognizant. And the fact that you can intend something and send it out, you have to have faith that you can change things. And also, when you do these kinds of practices, let's say you're doing it on somebody very specific, you have a difficult mother-in-law or a difficult child, when you continue with these practices, you will see the differences. And then your faith, of course, becomes much more vivid because you know the results. That's how we know. And we change because we change too. But our relationships change as a result of it, no question about it.
Would it be possible to send us a link that lists the order of the 9 breath purification? The first 2 classes of 2022 have detailed reviews for that. I don't know if there's you can watch that and goes into more detail about that practice. I have terrible allergies nearly always, but I want to practice Tonglen in the way most beneficial. Is there an alternative to purifying breaths or another way to ensure I'm sending my purest intentions and love?
Yeah, you can just do it. You don't necessarily need to. It is a practice that's done on the breath. The reason why it's done on the breath, it's a practice that we can actually do in front of someone difficult right in front of us. We breathe. It's a very ordinary activity, but right in front of a very difficult person or a situation, we can be performing a practice, and it's kind of invisible to the world. But it's not about the breath. It's about the visualization and intention, because in Buddhist practices, visualization is one of the most used techniques. And so what's important is that you visualize taking in the dark, changing it in your heart center, and sending out white light toward them, exchanging the energy. You don't really need to so coordinate it with your breath. The breath is something that can just like regulate it and make it very normal and ordinary, because we cannot be without a breath, not even, for longer than whatever, many seconds, breathing is, it's us. We do it all the time. And so doing the Tonglen with the breath, as all the other breath practices, is trying to merge, the extraordinary with the ordinary and turn the ordinary into practice. But the important thing is the visualization and intention.
100-syllable mantra Vajrasattva important to your practice. It is, that's something really has to be given to you by your teacher, as we always say. We're Victoria and I as students, this is more of like, we're like students that are telling other students stuff that they've learned. And there's certain practices that really have to be explained and given to you by teachers. Often there's certain empowerments that are called it, that you have to receive from teachers to get certain teachings. So, there's a Rigpa, which was Sogyal Rinpoche's organization, has a lot of information about a lot of things. And I'm sure on their website you could find some information about it.
Bodhisattva is an enormous practice, tremendous practice of purification, purifying the outer and inner. So like healing illnesses and healing the environment, but it is a part of Ngondro, which is preliminary practices, and you can only do them in context of taking refuge. We engage in Vajrasattva practices after we take refuge, and it's a part of our preliminary.
You get it from your teacher. Taking refuge means you become a Buddhist. Take refuge with a specific teacher from an authentic lineage of Buddhism. So I can't really go into that anymore. When in meditation, does it matter for emptiness of thoughts if your eyes are open or closed? Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the eyes are open. Other Buddhist traditions have closed eyes, and other meditation approaches have closed eyes, and probably some also have open. Meditating with open eyes is good because we're not practicing to sit on a cushion. We're practicing to, be in the world. And, most of that is with our eyes open. So it's good training, I think, to meditate with the eyes open. It's just what we are taught and believe in its efficacy. Do you feel it's challenging to apply these beliefs to your daily life and interactions? Yes, it's really challenging, but it's also really challenging not to have these practices and go through life. I don't mean to be flippant at all. I don't mean that to be, trite, but it's really, in many ways, it's that simple. We did not grow up as Buddhists. A lot of people do in the world, especially in Asia and a lot of the Asian countries. But we went to Buddhism because of the challenge to daily life and interactions. And, so, yeah, it is a challenge. But, I mean, I think it's a very worthy challenge. I also think the alternative is probably even more challenging.
I mean, any view is something that you have to believe in, right? I mean, the ultimate enlightenment is a mind without conceptual mind. So then we're speaking about, a sphere of awareness, of cognition that no longer is conceptual, no longer is framed in that kind of a dualistic subject-object process. But it's about efficacy of certain kinds of views. You take certain kinds of views and then you see, do you see more clearly? Have they changed you as a person? Have they changed your environment, people inside it, And that's what Buddhism is about. You're supposed to do everything for yourself. You examine and analyze the efficacy of these views for yourself in your inner space, but it doesn't happen on a level of opinion, it happens on the level of practice. You have to engage in meditation practice to be able to understand which views are better than others.
My intention is to reduce ego, eliminate ego as much as possible. I'm wondering, at what point does confidence turn to arrogance?
As I was trying to say before, I was watching a teaching of Garchen Rinpoche this morning, and she said, love and compassion really are Buddha nature. It's very, very simple. She said, we start right here. This is our Buddha nature, right? But then we go off and we go, well, who wrote about this? Who said this? Who analyzed this? When was it first brought into the teaching, etc., etc., etc.? Our ego mind is information driven. And, we can use and misuse information all the time. And, a lot of times it gives us a lot of arrogance because we have a lot of information, but really, our nature of mind is much simpler, and, it's much brighter, and it's much more open to others. It has a very soft kind of a place, and it's very non-conceptual. It's just something that you feel, like when when you fall in love, you feel it. It's not a concept. It's not a series of blah blah blah, of all these kinds of things. So by meditating and really touching your base consciousness, as opposed to these occurrences, Michael uses an analogy of sky and clouds. The more you habituate the sky, the more you use it and apply it to yourself and to others. That's how you start to distinguish between your true nature and the ego. And you can start to substitute living only through ego and through defenses of the ego and through the eyes of the ego. Rather, you start to live more through kind of your baseline, your nature of mind, and you'll sense it. You will connect to it emotionally. You will know when you're egoistic or when you actually like function from a deeper place.
Also, you say your intention is to reduce vanity, eliminate ego as much as possible. Well, if you want to do it as much as possible, look at how much you are invested in your practice. Have you found an authentic teacher? Have you taken refuge? If you think it's something that really, have you, we're talking about teachings you get after you take refuge, and practices actually she mentioned the Nondra, which are preliminary practices that you begin after you take refuge with teachers in tradition, the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. One of them is specifically about, eliminating arrogance and cultivating a certain level of humility. So are you just doing this class and meditating a little bit every day? How much are you studying? What are you studying? What are you reading? Are you watching teachings? Are you trying to go to teachings? Are you participating in teachings on YouTube, on Zoom, live teachings with teachers? There are a lot of opportunities in the world to study and practice, to take refuge, to become a Buddhist, to be a student of a great living Buddhist master. There are many. But that takes your investment and your commitment and how far you want to go.
But the fact that you're noticing the difference, that you're even qualifying, ego and arrogance and something else, is already a big step in the right direction. That means, you have an awareness of this duality, that you could live either like this in the center of your being, or you live on the surface world, where you're always struggling and fighting in opinions and, conventional kinds of terms. So, to be able to overcome this conventional level, and not completely, because we obviously have to live and function and survive, but to have another space and to function out of a deeper place in one's life. What Michael said is to engage really in the teaching, and engage in the practice seriously.
Thank you for advising about Tonglen. I've been practicing. Even when passing people that irritate me for no reason, I've been practicing inhaling irritation, hate, anger, and exhaling love and light. And I envision myself and the individual engaging in a hug. It has been very helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
That's the perfect way to do it. You do it on the spot. Tonglen practice is done on the spot. You do it on the cushion also when you're dealing with a very, very difficult situation, like the things we've been seeing in Ukraine, or you're dealing with it on the spot. You see somebody you want to help, or somebody difficult. an extremely potent practice for dealing with difficult circumstances and difficult people. It truly changes you, and I'm glad that you're doing it on the spot and you're noticing a difference in yourself already, and the practice will make it more and more so until there'll be very few irritants. There will be very, very little that you will be encountering in your life that kind of brings you to that emotional level of that high negativity. It'll become less and less.
If we have a hard time with our eyes open, do you think a better approach is to start closed and then move towards opening our eyes? Or should we just sit with the struggle until it improves? You know, it depends on what you're looking at. It can help if you can use a photograph of Buddha or a teacher or some kind of meditation, like, you know, deity that they work with in different traditions. It could be a flower, it could be the view out the window. So maybe it'll help you, rather than start with your eyes closed, it might help you to have something specific that you're looking at. Keeping your eyes open, but using that. I think that can help.
Yeah, it's called meditation with the object, where you're focusing on the object. And that, you know, there are two kinds of objects. There are pure and impure objects, you know, ordinary mundane objects like a rock or a flame, or pure objects, you know, obviously.
It could be a flower or something inspiring. It could be a
Yes.
photograph, you know.
But there's a very specific reason for that, is that you start to begin to see your mind, you begin to see your thoughts passing by right where you're looking at the object. When your thoughts arise, you can look at their empty nature and, you know, allow them to disperse.
Okay. Can I learn yoga by books? I'm not sure if by yoga you mean meditation or something like that. I mean, books are really important for, you know, study of Dharma. So I post a lot of stuff, especially on my stories on Instagram, from great Buddhist masters. Most of them have books out, and you can look them up. So follow, if you know, obviously you're following me on Instagram if you're here, so check out the teachers. There's a good Instagram site called Pema Lotus, is one of my favorites, who's run by our Dharma sister Shamel, who's wonderful. And you know, the various teachers also have their own Instagram sites, so do some research and looking. Okay, we will dedicate the merit of today's class for the benefit of all beings by saying our closing prayer. By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. So the Buddhist practice always is in the three parts. The first is making aspirations, setting intentions. The middle is the main practice, and the end is dedication. So we're not engaging in these practices just for our own benefit. We're dedicating the merit to the benefit of all beings. It's like taking a drop of water and putting it in the ocean. So you may feel this that the merit gained is very small. It's just a few of us doing this practice, but when you make that dedication, it's like you take the drop of water of merit and you put it into the ocean, and it becomes as vast as the ocean. As Solidago Rinpoche used to say, good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end.
And thank you for doing Homeland for Ukraine, for all the suffering, and thank you for practicing, guys.
Thanks to our producer, Nick Solidio, who does this with great joyous effort and generosity, and without whom we would not be here. So take care. Thank you very much.